morning, everyone. My pet peeve is a pretty simple one. Basically, it really bothers me when people don't take something seriously, especially when I am. Now, I don't mean to say that I would prefer everyone to take everything seriously, but when it is something important like a test or a deadline, I would really rather that people act responsibly and do what they need to do. For example, say that you have a test coming up, and instead of studying, your friend is This is what I hate. I study all week for a test or spend all night finishing a paper, while someone else just does whatever they want. It's as if they think there will be no consequences for not studying, while in fact they risk failing a test, or maybe even the class if they do it enough. For me, when someone doesn't take something like a test or some other commitment seriously, they are demonstrating a lack of responsibility and of respect for, or even of acknowledgement of, the consequences that could come from their actions. In Canada, it can be a criminal offence to be irresponsible or to disregard the possible consequences of your actions. Take, for example, Section 434 of the Canadian Criminal Code, which refers to arson. There's also Section 244, which applies to discharging firearms. These are just a couple of examples of crimes someone could be charged with if they act recklessly. One way in which you could look at my pet peeve in terms of law is diplomatic immunity. In Canada, diplomats can get away with quite a lot, mainly because of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations from 1961. Article 31 of this convention states that as you might remember from one of the case studies a little while ago, the irresponsibility of foreign diplomats was costing New York City millions in unpaid fines, all because they didn't have to worry about any consequences since they had immunity. My pet peeve also applies to the actions of states at the international level, mainly when countries fail to keep their obligations in or otherwise renege on international agreements. As it stands now, it is not uncommon for states to go back on their word or simply not fulfill their promises to other nations, largely because in most cases there are few or no actual consequences for doing so. There are a few ways in which international law tries to rectify or at least mitigate the problem of states being irresponsible and ignoring the consequences that could come from their actions. First of these come from the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. Articles 26 and 27 of the VCLT are two provisions which can be used to limit the irresponsibility of countries. They state that legally, at least, there are only two ways in which a state can avoid fulfilling its international agreements without violating the VCLT. This is through invoking Articles 61 and 62. Article 61 refers to the Article 62 is the exception based on all four of the articles from the VCLT that I listed are intended to limit what states can get away with when they make international commitments. As I've said, international law restricts how a state can legitimately back out of a treaty. Unfortunately, there are few ways to actually officially enforce these agreements if a state doesn't fulfill them anyway. Unofficially, if a country fails to meet their obligations, another nation could